So now you already know how to find interesting subjects and what kind of subjects tend to work great in iPhone photography. So the next step is to figure out from what angle to capture these subjects. Now, the interesting thing about photography angle is that the exact same subject can look incredibly exciting, interesting, and unique if it's captured from a unique angle, or if you capture it from the wrong angle, that exact same subject is going to turn into a boring photo. So more often than not, the angle you shoot from is actually even more important than the actual subject you're taking a photo of. So for the purposes of this video, I've brought this old bicycle with me, and this bicycle is going to be the subject that we're going to work with. Now, this bicycle, well, it's kind of interesting, but it's definitely not a unique or extraordinary subject. But my goal in this video is to show in how many different ways we can capture something as simple as a bicycle based on which angle we take the photo from. And you're going to see what a big difference the angle you shoot from can make in your iPhone photos. Okay, so the first and the most important consideration you have to think about when selecting the right angle for your photo is the height from which you're taking a photo. Now, most people only ever take photos from this height, and sometimes it works out great, but at other times it might not be the best angle. But the vast majority of photos worldwide are taken from the height of a standing adult, which may or may not be the best angle depending on each particular photo. So if we look at this particular scene, you'll notice that what we have in the background actually changes dramatically based on what height I'm taking this photo from. For example, if I'm here at the level of my chest, what you're going to see is that there's mostly forest in the background, and it actually works really nice for this photo because the bicycle stands out nicely against the green forest in the background. What I could also do is potentially consider going a little bit lower, and if I do that, I get an entirely different perspective, and now I am essentially shooting this photo from the level of the bike. Now, I could go even lower, but what's going to happen then is that now we have the trees in the background, and since the trees are dark and the bicycle is dark, I actually get a photo where the bicycle doesn't stand out as much relative to the surroundings. So the first thing you want to consider when working with angles is how each of these angles positions your subject relative to the background. And generally speaking, you want to position your subject in such a way where it stands out from the background. And the height from which you take photos is a great way to do that. Okay, so the first thing we experimented with was the height from which we're taking a photo. But obviously, this is not the only thing you can play with, and with a subject like this, you also want to walk around your subject to see what happens if you take a few steps to the right or to the left. So right now, if you look at the screen of my iPhone, you'll see that I've taken a few steps to the right, and you'll also notice how different the composition is because of that. But even though I'm at a different position, I'm still going to experiment and go a little bit higher, a little bit lower, and I'll keep moving around until I find the kind of composition and angle that I'm really happy with. Now, I happen to like this particular angle a lot because we also see this footpath extending into the background where the people are walking right now. And what this does is it creates the kind of feeling that the bicycle is pretty much going to take off on its own and follow that path. So I like that. And now I'm going to position the iPhone so that I'm really happy with how the subject relates to the background. And once I'm there, I'm going to go ahead and take some photos. But I'm not done yet. I've tried two different angles. Both of them are quite interesting, but I think there's more I could do. So let me walk around the subject a little bit more to see what else I can do here. Now I'm standing in front of the same bicycle, and we still haven't changed its position. But once again, you can see how different the angle is. And what I'm actually going to do here is I'm going to capture the bicycle from the top. And that way we can have these interesting patterns in the background. And once again, we can create a very unique and very different photo that is completely unlike the photos we were taking before. And we can create a change like this simply by the fact that we are once again experimenting with a different angle. So this might not be the most obvious angle, but if you experiment with how high you position your iPhone or from which corner you capture the subject, you can get some very different and very interesting results, even if your subject is kind of ordinary. And finally, if you're working with larger or more complex subjects, such as this bicycle, you can also get interesting results if you get up closer and focus the viewer's attention on smaller details within the big subject. So right now, I've gotten much closer to the headlight of the bicycle, and that in and of itself is actually an interesting subject. So I can set my focus and exposure on the lights of the bike, and then I can move around to find the perfect background for this particular photo. And once I'm happy with the result, I can go ahead and take yet another photo of the same subject, still in the same position, but once again, what we see in the end in the photo is completely different because we're shooting from a different angle. So as a photographer, you want to show the world to people in a way they've never seen it before. And if you can really get crazy and creative with finding a unique angle, that's a great way to do that. Right now, I'm standing next to this wooden footpath, and it is really the most mundane thing ever. But if you get really close, if you get low, close to the surface, it turns out that this footpath has these really interesting and unique patterns that can actually be used as subjects for your photography. Now, this is the kind of thing that, even though everyone has seen wooden footpaths like this, most people have never looked at them from this angle. And simply because you captured them from such a unique and such a different angle, you can create a very unique, very creative photo, and you don't need some crazy, extraordinary subjects for this. All you really need to do is show the world in such a way that people haven't seen it before, and finding a unique angle is one of the easiest ways to do that. Now, some people struggle to take photos from a lower angle, and there are various reasons for that. Perhaps, you have a problem with your knees or some other medical condition. And for people like that, what I recommend is using a selfie stick. And instead of using the selfie stick to take selfies, what you can do is actually reverse the selfie stick so that the iPhone is below the stick, as I'm doing it right now. And you can then use the selfie stick to take photos from a low angle without actually having to kneel down. So that's what I'm doing now. And if you look at what I'm doing, essentially I'm able to capture the same kind of photos that I could otherwise only capture if I was kneeling down, but this way I can do it while still standing up straight. So if there's a medical reason that makes it harder for you to take photos from a low angle, or perhaps if you're not comfortable getting down on your knees in public, then using a selfie stick can be a great alternative for you. When you're taking photos from a low angle, there's another benefit, and that benefit becomes apparent when you're in a large open space, such as on the beach, next to a large body of water, or perhaps in a large open square in the city. And that benefit is that if you select a lower angle, you can actually position your subject with nothing but the sky in the background, which can work really, really great to create minimalistic compositions with a lot of negative space. So if we look at our subject here right now, what you're going to see is that if I'm capturing this image from the height of a standing adult, the subject is positioned with the sea in the background. And it's not a bad photo, but I can really improve this photo a lot simply if I get lower. And as I keep getting lower and lower, what happens is that you'll see that there's more and more sky behind the subject. And the lower I can get, the more interesting the composition becomes. And what I can do is pretty much isolate the subject with nothing but the sky in the background. And this of course works great for things like sunset photography, as well as any other photos where you want to use a lot of negative space as a part of your composition. Besides taking photos from a low angle, another way you can show the world from a different kind of viewpoint is by taking photos from a high vantage point. So right now we're standing on this sightseeing tower, and because I'm here much higher than everyone else, I can take photos of the surroundings from the kind of viewpoint from which you normally never see them, and that is another way you can capture familiar subjects from an unfamiliar angle. Something else I recommend doing from time to time is actually taking a moment to look up. And funnily enough, this is something that most people never do. So in your daily life, you're normally either look down or straight ahead, but few people ever look up. And both in natural environments as well as in urban areas, if you look up, you can often find some very interesting and very unique photo opportunities. For example, right now, I'm standing next to this large pine tree, and it has a really interesting canopy. So if I point my iPhone upwards, and if I rotate it around a little bit, I can find some pretty interesting and pretty unusual compositions. And the interesting thing about taking photos like this is that I can rotate the iPhone however I want, and really there's no limits to my creativity, because no matter how I rotate it, the composition will make sense because I'm pointing the iPhone upwards. This works really good for photos of trees in forests and other natural areas, as well as for tall buildings in cities.